Hey guys, this is Mike Wolf. Welcome to the Spoon Podcast. This episode is Carlos Rodela and I just basically talking about coming off a very successful Smart Kitchen Summit 2024. We had it this week, Tuesday and Wednesday. We recorded this on Friday. You could tell maybe by listening to it, I'm a little low energy. I felt like I was just still exhausted. And it's Sunday, recovered a little bit. Went to my son's graduation yesterday, so it's been an eventful week to say the least, but just super happy and proud of the team and excited about it. And so we basically talk about what happened this week, a little bit behind the scenes, some of the talks, some of the products that were on display, and just the behind the scenes of putting on a big event. So if you went, listen. If you didn't listen, and you can get some insights on what happened, we will be having a video version of this. If you want to see some of the stuff and some of the pictures, we'll interweave that with the video version. That should be out on Monday, I believe. But this is the audio version. And again, just head to the Spoon if you want to check out the video version early this week. All right, folks, that's it for now. Let's get the podcast.
Welcome to the Food Tech News Show. I'm Carlos.
And I'm Mike.
And we're going to talk about SKS 2024.
You're so polished. I feel like yeah.
You know what it is I did a bunch of interviews during the show, and I went right back into it. I was like, oh yeah, I do this.
You got that muscle back. You got that atrophy. You're no longer atrophied in that regard.
No, I feel like buff
we were doing interviews on camera downstairs in a little interview room. Not everyone was interviewed just because we couldn't get everyone in there. But for those who don't know, that's what Carlos and our friend Luca was doing.
Yeah.
During the show. So we
got a lot of videos, and then also on a Netflix documentary style. So you'll be seeing them soon on the Spoon channel, YouTube, and all sorts of social platforms. But what I thought we'd do today is just go through some of the products that were shown there, some of the companies, and also some of the panels. But before we get started, what was your feel of the show? We just went through it. It just happened. How are you feeling?
We're back. So it was, I can't believe that it's been 5 years since we had Smart Kitchen Summit. I don't even want to say it's been 5 years, but we had the last one right before the pandemic in fall of 2019. January is when that hit. And so pretty much all in-person shows were off 2 to 3 years. I feel like people didn't do events. And then, CES 2022, I think, was the first big tech event, I think, that came back. I was there producing the food tech stuff for CES. But we held off a couple of years just because, we were busy doing CES, and it was just, we weren't quite, it's a different thing when you're investing your own resources and money into conferences. You want to make sure everything's fully back. Our friends from Japan had brought back Smart Kitchen Summit to Japan in 2022. So we've done 2 of those. And I just felt like after we did our Food AI Summit last year, we kind of got our mojo back in doing in-person events. And that event we did October last year. We're bringing it back this September. And I was just getting so many people asking us to bring Smart Kitchen Summit back. And you saw a lot of them the past couple of days, Carlos. And and so everyone was really, really excited. I felt like the energy was really high, and it just felt like a lot of people seeing old friends, but also welcoming a lot of new people into the community because it's been a few years, right?
Yeah, it was a bunch of people who knew each other, and then a bunch of new people being introduced to those people. And it felt like a really tight-knit group, and everyone was really having a good time and also learning. And, I think you did a really good job of setting up the panels to have these really interesting discussions. A lot of discussions about AI popping up, which makes sense because, we got to cover it. It's happening. And I think it was a really cool way to see all these different companies in so many different facets of food tech, talk together about AI and what's going to happen with that. And just innovation.
Yeah. And it was, I don't know what the term is, it was real talk because we'd gone through that first wave from, 2015 to 2020. And that's really why I said, we'll talk about the sessions after we talk a little bit about the exhibits, but that first session I set up for the day was really meant to set the tone. So I had, Scott Heimendinger, founder of Sancerre, and Modernist Cuisine alum Chris Young, who was there with Chef Steps, also co-wrote Modernist Cuisine, now is doing Combustion, and then Kai Schaffner, who ran Thermomix North America. I wanted to have this session out of the gate, lessons from the first wave and what we should
Mm.
know going as we build the second wave of the smart kitchen. And we could go into some of those lessons because we're going to go over some of the sessions, but it really was saying, hey, what did we do right and wrong the last time? And how can we learn from that and build a better, more successful wave of kitchen tech and future kitchen stuff this time around?
Yeah, definitely. Well, speaking of future tech, let's talk about some of it. I saw a bunch of things. We both saw a bunch of products and companies. The first one I got to mention is the one that struck me the most, kind of just left an impression. It made me want the product. I
Hmm.
still want it. I've been like hounding the person in email. It's called Nimble. I think it's Nymble. Is that right?
Yeah.
I
Nimble.
believe
I've
so.
been following
Yeah.
these guys for 5 years. I think about that long, and they're really diligent about building in public. So they've sent out emails every month or 2 months saying, hey, we have been testing this. I think for the last couple of years, they have had the Nimble. It's a cooking robot, essentially
Hmm.
does everything, adds all the flavors, the proteins, the vegetables, and automates that whole process, adds sauces and seasonings, etc. And they've been building in public. They have had essentially a working alpha in the hands of users for probably a couple years now.
And I think that's
And
such a smart idea too.
yeah, yeah. And I think they're
That beta
launching,
program.
like they're going to be launching this thing. It's ready to launch in the next 6 months or so, next 6 to 12 months.
Yeah, he was saying this the program you were speaking about is like this beta program where people pay a monthly fee to kind of just be in it and then use the device, but they don't have to buy the device outright. They're paying this fee to kind of test it for them. So it works for everybody. It works for the consumer to use this thing, which is great. They don't have to pay. I think it's gonna be $1,500 at the launch. They don't have to pay that, but they pay a subscription fee, and then they also get Nimble gets great feedback. Right? They get like direct feedback all the time of things they like and don't like. So yeah, and you've been following them for a long time. This is my first time seeing it in person too, which I think again is another great thing about SKS is where you see the product, and it was cooking, food that all smelt and tasted amazing. And so just to see what that is, a small footprint. It's not that big of a robot, you know.
Yeah.
It's this kind of thing where I feel like if we have more of these devices that aren't taking up ton of your counter space, that can kind of change how we think about these things.
Yeah. Small footprint. And Ragov's a really savvy entrepreneur. He gave a pitch that was super polished and talked about a lot of the metrics from this beta they've been running in the Bay Area and getting all that usage data, which, like you said, is really smart. And we had a panel on food robotics in the home ran by Wilson Rothman of the Wall Street Journal. Raghav wasn't on it. We had some of the bigger robots and also sous vide represented on that panel. But in retrospect, it would have been kind of interesting to have a robot like this, which is a self-contained smaller unit that does a lot of stuff within a small footprint on the countertop. And
Hmm.
we're seeing a few of these. Nibble is probably the most advanced out there in terms of getting close to market. We've had the Oliver robot, which is, initially was targeted towards the home, but actually they've gone, Elsa Labs has actually started to look at the enterprise market for like offices, etc. So Nimble is kind of like this small countertop one that's really interesting. And there's a few others, I think, people walking around at the show also doing similar robots.
Yeah, yeah. I think it is that kind of like, yeah, finding like the cross section of a small footprint, but then like has a good use case. Because like I was talking to them for a while and explaining like the things that I would normally make at home, which is like my brown rice and my chicken and my broccoli, and I'm like, what works with that? Like, can I put lentils
Hmm.
in it? Can I put all these
Yeah.
things that I would normally do anyhow? And
Yeah.
so it's this thing where it's a time saver. It doesn't have to replace everything. I think a lot of times we see like these future food devices and like they're like, hey, this is just how you're going to do things now. But this
Yeah.
is like an addition, right? I'll still make my meals 3 to 4 days out of the week, but then this thing can make it the other days I'm tired. So
Yeah. The Thermomix, it was successful because it did some level of stacking of functions. So it had automation of cooking different things, it changed heat, etc.
hmm
the Nimble is like that, but it takes it one step further in that it has all these ingredient chambers and adds it. So if we're going to like see a new category created around this, some level of countertop automation around cooking and robotics, this category that Nimble is doing is one that's one to watch, I think, over the next couple of years.
And kind of along the same lines, we saw Cookie, which I always thought should have be baking cookies, but it wasn't. And then Sheffy Asaf was still there, from talking about Sheffy as well. But like Cookie is still in early development stage, but it was another kind of countertop device that you would add food to and it would make stuff for you. So I think there's something similar there, but it wasn't,
Yeah.
I don't think, further enough along for us to know what it was going to do.
It was made by a company called Pot Robotics, and they were showcasing that. It had the ingredient chambers on the top. I think that the unit that they're showing, and they're perfectly transparent about this, was a prototype, not a usable cooking one. And they're pretty early into the stage, and they're hoping to move along pretty quickly where they can have a working demo in the next, I think, 6 to 12 months. But yeah, that one is definitely like a completely different design. I would expect over time that thing would shrink a little bit just because as they build it and work the prototype, it'll get smaller and have a smaller footprint.
Yeah. That's another device like that. And I think the other device, we saw a lot of these types of devices that were countertop. I think this was also kind of a B2B thing where smaller businesses would use this, but the egg machine, and that's not the name of it. What was the name of the egg machine?
It's the Ohm, which
Ohm.
is funny because it reminds me of my old boss, Ohm Malik at Gig Ohm.
Oh, yeah.
But it's not related to my old boss. It's actually an egg making machine. And this one is made by a company called Bridge Appliances. And we're interweaving the video on this. Hopefully some people can see this. Lance Latini, who's the founder of the company, and his co-founders told the story on stage on the second day of SGS. He was standing in line at a restaurant and there's this long line. And so he started talking to the first, and I think it was at a breakfast place. And they realized that the choke point for a lot of these breakfast oriented places is the making of eggs. And so they started to think about, hey, how can we use automation and robotics to create something that would make this move faster? And what was interesting is, unlike, some of the folks who are making back of house robots, they're not trying to do a whole bunch of things. They're not like trying to make salad bowls or make a full pizza. They just want to make eggs because they know that eggs is such a big part of, for example, breakfast at a lot of cafes, etc. And if they could speed that up, they can make breakfast sandwiches really quickly. So it looks pretty cool. They actually have it in the field already. And I like Lance's story and just Bridge Appliance's story because just from a personal perspective, he came out of a company working for Dean Kamen, who is a famous guy who invented the Segway. And also he's the guy behind First Robotics, which my son was a big part of. It's basically the national high school robotics contest program. Dean's the guy. And Lance and I were talking about that because it's such a cool program. But anyway, cool backstory. I think it's an interesting product. Makes a lot of sense for small cafes who need to make eggs really fast.
Yeah, I think that's it. Like they mentioned like the lines out the door in a lot of these breakfast places, which is so true. Like the ones that are really successful and the ones that are like, people go to every morning. It's just, you put that into the time you have to, spend each day, which is like, I'm going to be in line for 10 minutes, 15 minutes. So that helps with that. And then also it's a group of people from Portsmouth. And just a kind of personal note, I grew up in New York and went to New Hampshire and Portsmouth for like summers. So I'd go and work there. And so we just had a lot of reminiscing about Portsmouth in the area. So yeah, they're just all super honest and like, down to earth people.
You mean Portsmouth?
Nope. It's Portsmouth. I don't know what you're talking about. You've obviously never been there.
No.
And by the way, I would totally love to have a breakfast sandwich quick and easy. And if that makes it, easier for smaller businesses to give me a sandwich, then I'm all in. What else do we have? Oh, there was the non-alcoholic beer, which I forgot the name of the company. You're going to tell me?
Surreal Brewing.
Yes.
We had an inbound, someone sent us an email here at the Spoon saying, hey, I'm an entrepreneur in Portland. I make this non-alcoholic beer. My wife and I started the company, a guy named Tamer. And it's just a really cool product. And quite honestly, I've had an epiphany, man. I don't need to drink alcohol beer to get the sensation that I'm drinking beer. Every now and then, a couple times a week, I'll have an IPA at home. It's like me drinking a sleeping pill, but I keep abusing myself and keep taking these sleeping pills because I like the taste of IPA. I've realized drinking Tamer's beer, because he sent us a couple of 6-packs to check out, it tastes just like IPA, and I don't actually need to actually have the alcohol in the IPA to get the sensation. It tastes just like IPA. And dude, 15 to 25 calories for an IPA in a whole
Oh
can.
yeah, yeah.
That's like a also amazing part. Like I think IPAs have like 150, 200 calories in them. Who needs
And
that?
they make you feel heavy. That's what we were talking about in the interview. Like every time I still sometimes will miss, like you said, that taste of a Manny's or something that I really
Yeah.
like. That's a local beer.
And this guy, every
Um,
time we're on the phone with him, like we did a couple calls with him, each time he's like drinking a big mug. Middle of the day, I'm going,
nice.
it's kind of jolting. There's this like disconnect thinking this dude's drinking beer on a Zoom call. And then you
Yeah.
realize he's not. And that it's kind of brilliant marketing on his part to just raise the
Oh
pint
yeah.
while you're on a call. So
It is incredible tasting. Like it brought me right back to my days of drinking beer, and then I finished a half a can just while talking in the interview, and like I didn't feel anything. You know what I mean? Not obviously from the alcohol not being there, but also I didn't feel the heaviness. I didn't feel, and it felt kind of refreshing. It was weird. I mean, have had non-alcoholic beer, and we'll say this real quick. This was also in the interview you can check out on our YouTube channel, but like in the past, I would drink that like beer and feel that heaviness, and be like, what am I even doing this for? Like, I don't
yeah,
want
yeah,
this sensation. I want like some of the buzz or something. But
yeah,
so it's like, you don't need that. And if you think of old school non alcoholic beer, people would laugh at that. They'd be like,
yeah,
oh, that's like
yeah.
water that tastes terrible. So this is actually tastes good.
It's a trend that's happening. I mean, I think a lot of people, millennials and younger, are not drinking alcohol as much as we used to, as much as their old parents did, and abuse their bodies with it. And so, there's obviously other brands like Athletic, which I think sells at Costco, which is pretty good as well. But I'd recommend it. Surreal, pretty tasty out of Portland.
Definitely check
And
it out.
so we also had the current grills. That was a fun story because we had this fun activation. We were going to have the current grills actually cooking our happy hour meat and chicken and vegetables, and behind the scenes on the event side. These events are like these. You're juggling about 1,000 balls in the air. Those grills were supposed to get there on Monday, the day before the conference. They didn't get there till halfway through the first day of the conference. So we had like a team of people. Shout out to Lewis and Hamed, etc., that were working on these things outside. So people who were at SKS saw some guys making grills in the courtyard, and then they were ready for happy hour. But I thought the current electric grills, it's the first full size electric grill.
hmm
They look pretty good. I thought the food tasted just as good. I mean, I think, we did a survey about electric grilling, and a lot of people just have this mindset that grilling in the backyard involves gas and smoke and fire. So I think that's going to be a challenge for them a little bit. Just generally, this whole electric backyard grilling, that's going to be the hurdle they're going to have to overcome. But seeing it in action at our event, the food tastes great. You see tons of stuff just sizzling on the grill. So I think people, if they see it in action, will get used to it.
That's interesting. You think that a problem point is that
Yeah.
people want the smoke and fire.
Yeah. It's this thing you've grown up with your whole life. You've seen
Yeah.
grilling in the backyard. It's just fire. And I mean, sometimes it's charcoal, it's smoke.
Yeah.
And that's people in America love fire to cook, even in our insider homes with propane or, gas cooking, natural gas. So I think that's just a hurdle for both inside and outside when it comes to electric cooking.
Okay, so real quick, I have to say something on that. One, I have a very personal connection to this because in my apartment, outside of my apartment, there's a common area where there's a grill, an old school grill that has smoke and fire and smells, and it can come in my window, and it's terrible. This is a very personal story. I don't want that to be a gas grill. I want that to be an electric grill. That'll make my life and everybody around it much better. So I think that's funny that some people want that. And if they don't have it, they don't think it's a grill. But in apartment buildings, it'd be
Mm,
great.
yeah.
Okay. And then secondly, I think that is you can get over that. Like I think that's an old generation thing. I think it's like as long as the food is cooked well, um, that's just funny that people want that. I don't want that at all.
Yeah, it was funny. I mean, and to delve into the panels a little bit, Stacey Higginbotham, my longtime friend from GigOhm, she came and moderated the panel and at the end of the day, on the first day, about electrification. And we had Stacy Pacheco, the head of Current Barbecue, on that session. We also had Sam D'Amico, who's the head of Impulse Labs, making an indoor induction cooktop on that session. And I think as maybe Stacy said, that someday we're gonna have to face all this, because there's a push to essentially do away with gas overall. I mean, not to
Mm-hmm.
get into politics of it, people want to make this political, but overall in the future, you're going to see a lot more electric cooking. It's obviously in a lot of new builds in places like California, it's illegal or you can't put gas in some of these places, and you're going to have to use electric, but electric is just going to ultimately be more efficient. And I think you're just going to see a lot more of it over time. So it's an
Yeah.
interesting trend.
Yeah, I like that you had that talk with her, and it's on the Spoon as well, the interview. And you were talking about that, like, yeah, just this is the way you grow. And it's similar to the thing we said a lot of conversations at SKS, which is robots and AI are coming. Like, that's just, it's happening, right? Instead of running from it, find out how to work with it. And that's the same thing with electric. I mean, like, no duh. Like, people in the future be like, though they were using, did I just say no duh?
You did
From the
say no
90s.
duh. Yeah.
Well, no duh. People in the future will be like, those barbarians were using smoke and fire like cavemen, you know?
Barbarians.
Like, I don't think that, I think it's going to be normal.
Those
Um,
barbarians cooked without robots. How do they use that?
yes,
How do they do it
no
the best?
AI. There was no AI in their oven. What? Dude, that is really the story we're
They
going to
didn't
get.
have an AI powered rolling pin. By the way, that was a comment made by Scott Heimendinger on the first panel. And GeekWire took that quote and made a big article on GeekWire about our event.
Oh,
And the
really?
headline
That's
is,
awesome.
"We don't need AI rolling pins." Shout out and thank you
Before
to
we,
GeekWire for doing that.
Yeah,
Sorry.
shout out to GeekWire. Before we leave the product thing, there's just two I want to mention. One is Kitchenery was there, and I got to see that in person because we talked about them on the Spoon a lot. And it was cool to see the devices. I don't know how close they are to market. I forget. I think I asked in the interview, but they have their own charge pad. It's basically wireless induction, energy. So like you have these devices like blenders and teapots and stuff, and they all work without any cords. And we talked about that before, but they said that it worked with obviously if you had your own kind of induction surface, but they had their own little charge pad. And I think it makes sense for if you have a lot of devices. I think me personally, again, I have very few, very small countertops. There's not much going on there anyhow. My blender's plugged in. It doesn't matter too much if it's not
Yeah.
because I have a small spot. But if I have a bigger kitchen and a lot of appliances, I would
Yeah.
like them to all be wireless.
Yeah. So
What are your
Kitchenery
thoughts?
is making wireless power appliances where you essentially the power comes through the countertop. In their case, it's a mat, kind of like those charging mats for your mobile phone.
Yeah.
It's essentially that for a mixer or another type of appliance. They are, I think, doing this outside of the Wireless Power Consortium standard. So there are standards being built around this type of technology. There's also companies, we've written about a couple of them doing this where essentially it'll power your appliances, your countertop appliances, but also act as an induction cooking top. So like you might be able to put a pan on there, fry some eggs, remove it, and put your blender on there and power it. And this can all be built into your countertop. Like you actually have it not just a pad. As this thing
Yep.
gets further integrated, it gets kind of pushed into the countertop as well. And it's part of like a trend that we're calling the invisible kitchen. We actually had a session on it at SKS.
Yeah, I think it really comes down to, the surface area you have available to you. Like, if you have a home and you can like redo the kitchen to have this kind of platform, then it works. If it's smaller pads, then it's use case. It's case by case. But I still think it's cool. Like it works immediately. You get to see it in person there at SKS. It was like, yeah, there goes. It's like you said, multiple different devices all being, working right away. And then also, I forgot this company. You're gonna look it up for me, but they look at different tastes, and he gave
Yeah.
me a whole spiel about it,
Yeah.
and he said that basically they're objectively looking at all the different tastes in the world and kind of cataloging them in a database. I think
Taste gauge. I
products.
mean, the product's called Taste Gauge. I think the company's called
Okay,
Mame Technologies, and they're essentially trying to digitize taste, which has been a long-standing trend that I've been following for a while now. This idea of how can we digitize the world of taste so that we can then, recreate things. We can use things like AI to create new flavors, etc. So they're creating a product that I think they're going to try and put in the hands of things like ingredient developers, CPG brands, etc., to help them, understand taste better. So like
Yeah.
we'd have a digital measurement, a neutral, kind of an objective digital measurement of saltiness and sweetness. And what's the different flavor matrix for an orange versus, a pear? And they're trying to build that.
Yeah, he also mentioned they could like give it to marketers too, right? So that would be helpful for them. But I thought it was funny because he mentioned that you could even do like the taste of a rock, for instance. And I was like, do we want to do that? The taste of a rock? He was joking, but
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
thought
Well, maybe. I thought you said the taste
it's
of a rock.
salty,
Like,
right?
well, here's what a country's food tastes like. But you meant a rock.
Oh, nice. A actual rock. But you know what? I do know. I think it is salty because I think I've
You've
tasted a
licked a
rock when I was a
rock.
kid. When
Carlos
I was
has
a
licked a
kid, I think
rock.
I did.
Yeah.
I think I did.
Did you eat glue too?
No,
You didn't. Okay.
some people still do that.
Yeah.
It's gross. Anyways, I'm not judging. You do
I
you.
am. I am judging.
You are. Let's just talk about some of the panels. And I mean, you were there for a lot of them. I was in the interview room for a lot of it too,
Yeah.
downstairs. But I do know that Mike Lee was there. Man, he is an awesome fellow. Made that Future Market and his book that we both have talked about on the show. And he was on the show and he was there on a panel as well. But what's some highlights for you on some of the panels?
Yeah. Quickly, Mike Lee presented around his new book, Mies. We heard him on the podcast about a month ago, and he does a great presentation painting the picture of what these different future scenarios look like that he illustrated in his book. And what's so powerful about it, and I talked about this on the podcast with them, is the tool of using storytelling around future casting. Like, so if you're going to say, hey, these are some trends that will happen in the future, 30 years out, here's like a dystopian future, here's like a good future. And to illustrate this, I'm going to tell the story of a family called the Burlingtons. He talked about the family of the Burlingtons, but I think he mentioned it on the podcast. They have this platform called Stack. It's an embedded stomach sensor, and how it changed all their behavior. It was just really, really fun. I think the audience got a lot out of it, and he had a lot of great illustrations. He
Yeah.
did a book signing afterwards, but I would definitely encourage getting his book if you guys are interested in checking that out. That was midday on day one. Before that, like I said, we set up the whole day with Scott and Chris Young and Kai with the lessons from the first wave. And one of the takeaways that I mentioned earlier is, Scott Heimeninger had this great characterization of the first wave, and that we saw a lot of devices where people just said, hey, let's slap Wi-Fi onto it and call it a smart
Yeah.
rolling pin or whatever. And he thinks that we're kind of starting to see that with AI. So he, are we in danger of repeating our past by just saying everything's AI powered? I mean, I get a pitch every day about a new AI powered appliance. I just got one about an AI powered backyard barbecue grill. And so it's interesting. I want to hear about these products, see what they're doing, but is this marketing? Are these technologists that are just trying to say, here's a cool technology, I want to be first to market and do an AI powered grill? Or are they really adding value added features that add true value to the consumer where they can't do something that they did before? That was another takeaway from a lot of this day one was one of the lessons was, did we in that first wave bring true value to the consumers, or were we just creating products or technology for technology's sake, and they never used it because they didn't see the value? We made their lives more difficult. We added more steps to the process. So you really
Yeah.
need to kind of step back and put yourselves in the shoes of the consumer before you go out and create a product. And I would encourage, and I think we heard this throughout the day, go talk to real consumers
Right.
and test your assumptions before you just build your product with your fellow engineer.
I mean, again, going back to Nimble, like they have
Yeah.
a beta program that gets that kind of feedback right away. And I think that it's very similar to, the app market when that happened, right? Like every company had to have an app. Did they really though? Did they really? And a lot of those apps went away. I guess the answer, kind of a short-term answer, is yeah, we're going to see a ton of AI in everything, including rolling pins. But at some point, it'll get weeded out, and the good stuff will stay.
Yeah.
Like the good apps are the most successful apps, right? They still are, and the new ones, again, that kind of rolling out a million different apps happened, but then all the companies that didn't really see the benefit, and the consumer that didn't see the benefit for
Yeah.
having that app, it just went away. So
Yeah. And the way I set the programming up for the conference was I really wanted to have talks about what we learned, but have honest conversations about what's happening now and debate about it. So and one of the interesting things was at the very end of day 2, we had the media panel where we had journalists get on stage and talk about what they see and what they think about tech powered kitchen and future cooking products. And so we had, Joe Ray from Wired, who I love Joe. He oftentimes will be a little bit more skeptical. We had, Wilson Rothman, who loves food tech, but he's mainly just editing other people's work. He runs the Wall Street Journal's Personal Technology Bureau. And they kind of got into a little debate about AI. And I think Joe posed the question, do we really need AI in the kitchen? Kind of, I think, almost assuming that everyone would think no. And Wilson basically said, it's here already. And he was talking about one of the apps that he uses around recipes and cooking. And he's seeing recommendations and things that are brought to the fore with AI that are not possible without AI. And so not that Wilson was like this over enthusiastic, like endorser of AI in the kitchen, but he definitely thinks it's already here to stay and that you're already seeing products from it. So I felt like throughout the course of the 2 days, there was a lot of debate. It wasn't a Pollyannish, like, hey, rah, rah, here's AI coming into the kitchen, but it's like, what are the issues here? Are we seeing value? And like, let's not repeat the mistakes of the past.
yeah, and if I think back on almost all the talks, the ones I saw, AI did pop up a lot, and almost all the time, it was not. I don't want to say ubiquitous, but it was definitely like it's just here kind of thing. Like, and by the way, it was in artwork. A lot of the different presenters had artwork on the stage, or different slides, and it was AI driven. Like, it was AI made artwork. And it wasn't just like Mike Lee, it was like other people. And I just think that, yeah, like a lot of people brought up examples of it, and it just seemed to be part of the conversation in my mind. It didn't seem like a debate as much. That last one was more of a debate, but it's funny because it's almost like, yeah, we're just using it. It's just part of it now. But yeah.
Yeah. And so, Nick Holzer had a great presentation. He's the head of Samsung
Oh
Food.
yeah.
And so he told a little bit of the story of, his days with Whisk. He was doing AI 10 years ago around recipes. And he talked about how he used to fly to the US from Europe to get GPUs because they didn't have enough GPUs to power their AI and build their AI models. And then we also had a couple presentations or talks on the day 2 around personalized nutrition. And that's an area where we're seeing a lot of people trying to use AI to build what that personalized nutrition model looks like. So that was another interesting set of conversations.
Oh yeah, Victor's company.
Victor Penev from Edamon. We also had Nushin from January AI. Before they got on stage, we had Momo who's the CTO of Biome, who gave a presentation on essentially creating, AI powered personalized nutrition.
I think what's interesting is, and you see this because of SKS and because of events like this, where you talk to these people over the course of years. You talk to the Victors of the world, of different people in personalized nutrition. They have been working with AI. They have been working with versions of it, right? AI's just gotten better and changed. So, but they've been using machine learning. They've been doing things to help them create their products or make their products better. So, yeah, I think that it was interesting when I talked to people in the interviews. So many of them had already been doing this stuff, and just kind of like now just watching it advance is all.
On day 1, another panel led by Wilson Rothman. He did the panel about AI in the kitchen. And we had on that panel James Bricioni. James is a 2-time Chopped champion. After he won Chopped, he got a call from IBM and they asked him to help consult on building Watson, Chef Watson in particular. So he would go in there with go into the kitchen and work with a bunch of IBM AI scientists to basically map out how Chef Watson can cook. and then
Yeah.
then he would essentially cook against it. And so he told those early day stories about helping to build Chef Watson. And so it's interesting to have that little bit of history lesson, and then also look at like how guys like Kevin Brown of In It are building AI for the kitchen as well.
And to move from AI real quickly to robotics, and I think that's what we close with, is we definitely had, companies and people talking about that on the panel. Obviously, we had Lee, Moto Pizza, and what's the guy who was talking about the robot in Japan?
Yeah, so Yuji, who's the
Yuji, yeah.
CEO of Tech Magic, and so Tech Magic is this fast growing Japanese company. They're doing robots for restaurants in Japan. They have a big deal with Yum Brands, which is the KFC brand in Japan. They're also helping Cup Noodle, like those cup noodles that everyone eats here. Like they're helping build robots for them. But also, what's interesting is they build their own robots that oftentimes they'll put in their own restaurants. So I've been to two of his restaurants in Japan. One is a spaghetti restaurant where they're essentially making, in about 90 seconds, they'll make a big plate of spaghetti for you after you put in your order on a touchscreen. It whips along on a conveyor belt. And I think we have a video of that on the Spoon TikTok or one of those. You can check it out there. And he also has one that does essentially a noodle, a ramen based robot that makes, you can pick all these different flavors, chicken, how spicy you want, and it'll make, and this has this big robotic arm, drops the flavorings and the spices in your ramen, and just presents it to you about a minute later. So that's pretty cool.
Yeah, I think just that idea, and he also told the story on the panel, which we'll put a video up at some point of the panels as well on YouTube, but about how he was inspired to make that robot because he went to visit his mom and had her cooking, but then realized at some point she won't be able to make that meal anymore. I thought that was a really touching moment, and like that's what he was building the robots for, so he could replicate that kind of like flavor and taste and recipe.
Did you get a
So
little? Did you get a
born
little
out of
misty? Did you get a little misty during
I
the
got a
panel?
little teared up. Yeah, yeah.
A little
I'm
tear.
still verklempt from it, but yeah.
Yeah, that was a great panel. So that was, we had a lot of consumer kitchen because that's really the origin of SKS. But because we think restaurants are part of the consumer meal journey, we had a couple of sessions on restaurants, and this session was on the tech powered restaurant. And we had Yuji from Japan, we had Lee Kendall, who's got the super fast growing restaurant chain in Seattle called Moto Pizza, and then also we had Daniel Schlossman, who is the chief customer officer for Wonder. And so it wasn't all robotics. Wonder's a really interesting company. You probably remember if you're a reader of the Spoon, they were this company that raised like an obscene amount of money. They've raised, I think, $1.5 billion, which is insane. They're led by Mark Lohr, who is like probably the best fundraiser of all time. And they used to have this business where they would have Mercedes Sprinter brands vans running around with custom built kitchens inside. They'd cook your meal on your curb. And then a kind of guy dressed in a chef outfit. I can't talk. A guy dressed in a chef's outfit would walk it to your door, but they pivoted about a year ago and just started going towards like this kitchen concept or this restaurant concept where they'll be cooking about 10 different chef brands out of one restaurant. They're using a lot of delivery. It's kind of crazy. It's a lot of money, but the reviews by consumers, they love the food. So they're doing something right.
Yeah.
And so Daniel talked about that. I did ask him, you guys have been able to take chef brands like Jose Andres and others and recreate the recipes and do it in a way that consumers really like it. A lot of ghost kitchens have tried to license brands, like, and this isn't a chef, but like Beast Burger, right? So
Yeah, you brought that up. Yeah.
Mr. Beast tried to tap into his community, did a deal. So Beast Burger came up. That ended up in disaster because the quality was very high. The variability of the quality was high. A lot of people were unhappy with the quality of the food. That made Mr. Beast unhappy with the food. He wanted out of the deal. And it just, this whole big drama spilled into public view. Wonders had none of that. They've been very successful. People love it. And so I asked them about that and how they do that. So like you said, Carlos, we'll have some of these panels a little bit later. We got to get all the videos out and processed, but hopefully in about a week or so.
Yeah, the videos of the panels, as well as the interviews that we were doing downstairs, those look really great. I'm editing them starting today, and so look for that. But in general, SKS 2024 success. It was fun to see everybody in person. Again, we talked to these people online in interviews and digital Zooms, but not in person. So it was cool to see that. And I'm excited for September because we're doing that other show
Food
again.
AI Summit. Yeah, just
Food AI
generally, like
Summit.
the energy was super high. It's been a long time. It was like a reunion for so many of these folks that were
Yeah.
really excited to be in the same room. And I can't tell you how many people came up to me, Carlos, with a tear in their eye.
Yeah.
And said,
It was a crying.
There was no tears in the eyes, but people were very, very happy to be there. And it was just a lot of fun. And so we're excited to bring it back. And the venue is cool. So we did it at Block 41. I thought the venue was like perfect for the size of the event.
Yeah, totally. Because upstairs, downstairs, the bleed through for audio, because I'm a technical guy doing all the technical stuff. It was not bad. Like, I mean, I didn't even hear the upstairs, downstairs. So there's some cool soundproofing they got going on.
Yeah.
And yeah, you had like a great area for demos, and you had the talking area, the different panels and stuff. So that's the professional term, talking area.
Yeah, I said the talking area. Like other places were like quiet. You couldn't talk, like silent movies, but in the talking area.
Yeah.
I'm just kidding.
The talking area, you could talk as much as you want.
But like old school SKS people will remember we did it for like 3 years at Benaroya Hall, and that place was like a giant maze. And you'd end the day with like 20,000 steps if you had an Apple Watch that time, which you probably didn't.
Nice.
But like you walked forever and you were super tired. This place is much more self-contained, a lot more efficient. And I think, and they had that great outdoor courtyard. Now, by the way, we did it in June this year, and we had the sun breakthrough on the second half of the first day. And then the second day, we're all nice and beautiful. So I thought that was really awesome. People got to see Seattle and all its glory.
It's sunny glory. I will also say that I think the banner when you walked in right into the event there, it looked pretty good. I wonder who made that.
Okay. Yeah.
All right.
Carlos made it using, I think, some AI powered Wonder technology.
Yes.
So that was
I just thought I'd bring it up because it was another AI thing that was just there, right?
You're going to show
it. We're not talking about it. We're not debating it.
People will see it on, I think, the videos you put
they're seeing it now.
They're seeing it right now. All right.
But the point is, it's this thing. It's a through line, really, of the show, I think. Besides other things like products and robotics and stuff, and what we did right and what we did wrong, but I think AI was also a through line where it's just there at the show. Like AI made this banner; it's just part of our experience. And there you go. Well, that's a quick wrap up in an hour or so of the whole event. Mike, thanks for joining me on our show that we haven't done in a while.
Yeah, thanks for being there. Thanks for helping out and all the work you do. And it's a wrap for SKS 2024. So
it's a wrap.
We'll get this out, I think, in the next couple days. Depends on how fast you add those pictures, Carlos. People are waiting.
I got to do some editing. I know. I'm going to say, well, no one's watching this live, so it doesn't matter when I say it's going to be out. They're not watching it live. It'll be out soon. Before we leave, we did tease it at SKS, but the podcast network, the Spoon Podcast Network, I'll edit that out. The Spoon Podcast Network coming soon. Do we want to say anything about that, or just that it's on the way?
Let's tease it. And we got a lot of exciting things we're working on in that regard. So if you like podcasts and you like food,
there you
just
go.
Stay tuned.
Stay tuned. And with that, we'll see you later.
Bye, everyone. All right, that's it. That's our wrap up. We'll be talking more about this and having more insights and photos and videos from SKS in the coming week and weeks following this. So check them out at The Spoon. Sign up for the newsletter to keep informed about it. If you want to find out more about future events, sign up for our newsletter or just visit The Spoon and check out our events page. We'd love to see you at the next Market Summit, at the Food AI Summit, or wherever we have an event. All right, folks, signing off for now. We'll talk to you soon.